In 1940, they were not accepting men of color into the Royal Air Force. A good friend of mine, Sidney Kennard, whose father was an Englishman and his mother was a West Indian lady, he had a pilot's license because they were wealthy, and he'd got one in America. He actually applied, came to England in 1940 to join the Royal Air Force. A very handsome, light-skinned Guyanese, and they turned him down. But when things got bad, of course, they get turned to the colonies. And I was one of the first 4 from Guyana to volunteer. Well, when I was shot down, of course, it created quite a bit of a stir because, you know, I don't think there were many black airmen in those days, and particularly black officers in the Royal Air Force. And I was in solitary confinement. After I'd been in solitary confinement for about 5 days, I was pulled out in the bright sunshine. A photograph was taken of me. I didn't know for what purpose. At the end of I was shot down in 43. At the end of 44, we were of course, we were aware that the Russians were approaching. We could see refugees fleeing, the German refugees running, going north, south, east, west. As the Russians approached, we knew that soon we could be liberated. But then we were, in January 45, we were suddenly told that we were going to be evacuated, leave the camp. It was in the middle of winter. It was a severe winter. The roads were covered in snow, and, you know, we marched for 5 or 6 days in the snow and stopping off in barns and things like that. It was really tough. And landed up in a place about 60 kilometers southeast of Berlin called Luckenwalde, which is a huge holding camp where thousands of prisoners of all ranks, and it was a really disgusting, flea-ridden, disgusting place with hardly any food. There were no Red Cross passes from them. That was when it was terrible. Suddenly, from being this privileged place where we could read music, we had bands, we had sports events, we had a theater. We had everything that you could possibly have except a woman. Okay.
So really,
suddenly you got into a measly place which was filthy, bedridden with bugs, hardly any food, and the bombs were falling all along. We could hear the bombing because we were so close to Dresden, and Dresden, of course, was knocked out, and to Berlin, and we could hear the war happening outside. But we were aware that the 2 armies were coming together. The Russians were moving in from the east, and the Americans were coming up towards the Elbe. So it was an exciting time, at the same time a difficult time. And then one morning we woke up, and there were no guards. The Germans just disappeared.
They fled?
They fled because they know the Russians were there. And within a few hours, the Russians crashed into the camp. You know.
What about heating in camps? I mean, how did you guys keep warm?
Well, it was cold.
No heat?
No, we didn't have heat. You know, I can't remember heat at all. You know, we would have big old blankets covered in blankets and lice, and I think itching kept you warm. When you lay in bed, you were itching so much. But there are lots of incidents. That part of the war was very horrible. So I can remember telling Kurt a bit about my experiences, and he was, but we never got around to this miserable part. And he was saying, gosh, that was a very privileged life because, our money was still going into the bank, our paychecks.
So when you guys are walking, being transported or just logged, you were walking in the cold, in the snow, no heat, just walking. So walking kept you warm.
Walking, and then at night we slept. If we go to a hay barn in a farm, we could bury ourselves in the snow. Some of the guys went and slept with the cows. The cows kept them warm.
And that for 6 or 7 days.
Yeah.
You walked.
No, on the walk, that was it. And then in the camp, I can't remember. We might have had some burning thing, but it was primitive.
So over.
But of course, I mean, there are lots of things I could tell. That part of it is full of incident.
Sure.
Because I was once sent out on a foraging party to go and bring back food, and there were like 6 of us in a truck, and we were taken out with a Russian guy, going in this van, and we drove into the countryside, and we arrived at a farm, and it was all slushy from the mud still, and you could see dead bodies lying, and you had to walk over dead German and Russian people, and then told to captain. I thought when we set out that we were going to go and raid some German shop, that and steal, but found that we had to round up cattle. Now, how would I know how to catch a cow? I'll get it into it. Well, that was quite a story.
So
that was a story.
What's what happened?
Well, it's amazing how things happen. The first attempt is that my pilot, who is a Canadian guy, Al Angel, he didn't know anything about it. He got a big piece of wood, approached a cow, hit it on his head, the cow fell down. He took out his penknife, cut his throat, and that was even worse, because a cow is a heavy thing, and to drag a dead cow, poor truck into a truck, that was impossible. But eventually, somebody had the idea, well, why don't we get a halter? So we went to the farmer, reluctantly got a halter, captured the cows, and made a ramp, and caught about 6 or 7 cows and went into it. But we had to go into the same back of the truck with these cows, and the cows are petrified now. And I can remember sitting right at the end of the truck, and the tail of a cow was waving over my head, and the power was petrified, and suddenly I got a blessing, which was the most disgusting state of affairs. Can you imagine being shot on your head? Normally, to get in chambers, you need some financial assistance, and that wasn't forthcoming. But then looking in the newspapers to see if there are jobs available for people with legal qualifications, because businesses are starting up, they must need lawyers. I applied right, left and center. Never even a reply, because in every form, every application you had to say place of birth. In that kind of period, I heard about the possibility. Somebody says, why don't you go into the theater? Earl Cameron was playing in a play called 13 Death Street, Harlem, a terrible play which did the Moss and Bayer tours twice nightly. He went into the first film he made, The Pool of London, and he left the part, and I auditioned, and I was offered the part straight away because they were happy to have somebody there. And for 1 year I toured in the theatre, playing the lead in a play, but twice nightly you learn about the theatre. You learn how to walk on the theatre, how to use your voice and things like that. And it was touring around, so even if you made a boob in one town, it was not so bad. But then the year I knew my craft. I knew how to speak, how to move, and whatever. And I applied. From that, I applied to join the Laurence Olivier Festival of Britain Company.